The standard work week in the United States is 40 hours. This standard was put in place by the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938. This act also instituted child labor laws, a regulation for minimum wage, and overtime pay. This act created a standard work week that was beneficial during a time of need for jobs in America during the Great Depression. However, this act failed to put a cap on the hours per week and has contributed to the cultural trend of long hours in the United States workforce. The existence of extreme jobs is something that is becoming more common. And these jobs require workers to put in 50 hours or more in a week and can be found in a variety of fields, including healthcare, the legal industry, manufacturing, and many others. This researcher experienced working for one of these extreme jobs while being employed in the food industry as a salary manager at a restaurant chain. The work week was 50 hours minimum, and since it was a salary position, when the hours worked exceeded 50, there was no overtime pay. These extreme work hours can have a negative impact on workers' stress level and also their production output. A 2008 study conducted by Yasushi Suwazana et al. Examined the association between long working hours and fatigue symptoms on Japanese workers. They sought to address the problem that had become apparent in Japan called karoshi, which means death by work. This is thought to be the negative cardiovascular effects and mental health effects on workers due to excessive workload. Previous research has studied this subject and created a benchmark threshold of work hours that correlated with subjective fatigue symptoms. This benchmark was 9.6 to 11.6 hours per day, equating to 48 to 58 hours per week. The research team hypothesized that the benchmark threshold would correlate with subjective fatigue symptoms, helping to generalize previous findings and also examine the specific job-related stress in men versus women. Participants were collected from a Japanese steel company, and they consisted of daytime employees, 3,069 of which were men, and 412 of which were women. They were given a questionnaire about fatigue, stress level, and number of hours worked in a week. The results showed a positive correlation between high number of daily working hours with the following variables. For both men and women, chronic tiredness, negative effects on interpersonal relationships, irritability, anxiety, and decreased willingness to work were all shown. For men, physical disorders, and for women, depressive symptoms were shown. These findings support the research proposal for the current research project and also help to generalize other research studies that found a correlation between fatigue and high working hours. Because of these findings, Suwazano's team suggested that workplaces where there are longer working hours should pay closer attention to their employees to ensure they create a buffer against these negative effects. However, a better solution may just be to reduce the hours in a work week. Excuse me. The next research project that supports the current research is a 2017 study by Gillinston, Anderson, and Muller. In the European Union, the field of registered nurses had seen a shortage of workers, and this was likely due to the high working hours and the work to life conflict that the nurses felt because of the high working hours. The work hours also had an effect on the recovery time of the workers needed between shifts, which help prevent stress and stress-related illnesses because they have time to recover after they work so much. These researchers hypothesized that reducing work hours for nurses would have an effect on recovery and psychosocial relationships. They therefore recruited participants from the orthopedic surgeon nursing department in a Swedish hospital that had reduced the nurses' shifts from 8 hours to 6 hours. while still allowing for 1 day a week of 8 hours so that administrative tasks could be completed. They also eliminated lunch breaks so that they could make sure that they had all the time to do what they needed to do in those 6 hours, and hired more staff to ensure that work could still be completed. The nurses' salaries were maintained through the changes in the structure of the schedule, so nothing was changed for their pay. They were still paid the same. Of the 117 nurses in the department, 12 volunteered and completed the interviews, 11 of which were female and 1 of which was male, and all participants' identities were kept anonymous. The interviewers asked semi-structured questions on psychosocial aspects of the nurses' work environment, the effects the new policy had on their ability to recover from work, the conflict with work and personal life, their health, as well as economics and laws and regulations. The results showed an improvement in the workers' energy and ability to recover, their overall work performance, as well as more balance between work and personal life. This research supports the proposed hypothesis of the benefits of reducing hours for workers. This project examines significantly less working hours than the first research project by Suazzano, but they both add validity to the current researchers' claims. The final article to be discussed is a 2019 study by Park and Park about the impact of the standardization of reduced working hours in South Korea. This article begins with a discussion on previous studies that have shown long working hours to correlate with lower productivity. Different studies speculate as to why, but it could be due to the effects of stress on workers' health. Park and Park wanted to study the effects of the reduced working hours in Korea, which had been reduced to 40 from 44 hours between the years of 2004 and 2011. So those were the years that the regulations were put into place, and I think it just took businesses some time to implement those, so that's why it was between those years. Their hypothesis was that the reduction in hours had an effect on production efficiency, and they also wanted to examine the effects from the employer's perspective, and also the effects of the drastic reduction of hours, which was actually closer to 48 than 44 hours for the average norm before the standardization of the 40-hour work week. The participants were collected from plants with 10 or more workers. The workplaces had confirmed to have implemented the 40-hour work week standards, and the researchers collected their data from archival surveys from 2000 to 2012 from the Mining and Manufacturing Survey, which was data collected by Statistics Korea to study the production per year by the manufacturing plants. And the researchers used the basic wage structure survey collected by the Ministry of Employment and Labor to study the reduction of the working hours at each plant. They discovered that the reduced hours in the work week correlated with increased output per worker, which they believed to be due to the increase in capital equipment that was seen over the years and the improvement in overall efficiency, which was due to the less stress on the workers. This research adds to the validity of the current research on reducing the United States work week, and also to the first 2 articles discussed in this presentation. The research hypothesis that is built off of these 3 studies that this researcher would like to investigate is that those who work a 4-day, 38-hour work week, which would consist of 9 hours of work a day plus a 30-minute lunch break, will display less signs of stress and higher productivity than the group who works 5 days and 47.5 hours in their week, which also would consist of 9 hours a day plus a 30-minute lunch break. To test this hypothesis, the researcher would recruit 500 to 1,000 managers from the sandwich chain Jimmy John's because of the researcher's experience working there. This is a high-stress job, and there's a lot of product output expected of these managers. So this would be the perfect location to perform this project. The standard for the management work week at Jimmy John's is around 45 to 50 hours per week, honestly closer to 50. So one of the groups of the participants would stay at approximately the same amount of hours and days, and the other group would reduce their hours to 38 hours per week. Female and male participants would be studied separately to see if there are any gender differences as well. The measurement of stress of the managers would be calculated through the brief job stress questionnaire, which was used in the 2008 study conducted by Suazano and et al. To measure stress of the Japanese workers. To measure the productivity, and you can also see the first page of this job stress questionnaire on this page. To measure the productivity, there would be a weekly log of weight of meat sliced for the restaurant, and also of the administrative tasks completed by the manager. The researcher, for the procedure, the researcher would randomly select restaurant locations to take part in the reduced hours group and the control group. The control group would have no knowledge of the other group's reduced hours, and that group would be instructed to not discuss their practice with others in the company. And like the orthopedic nurses in Sweden, the managers with reduced hours will have part-time workers who will help make up for some of the lost hours. Both groups would keep a weekly log of their productivity of meat output and completing administrative tasks for 2 months. At the end of 2 months, both groups would complete the stress evaluation survey, as well as complete an interview conducted by the researchers to assess how the participants felt about the project and how they felt in general at the end of the 2 months. The researchers would then calculate the production output and the stress levels of each group. The hypothesis of the researcher is expected to be correct. The group that worked 38 hours will show significantly reduced stress, and the output of product will also be improved, as well as the administrative tasks. They will be able to be fully completed each week. They'll have the energy and time to do that. The results of reducing the hours would be less turnover for management and less burnout due to the time allowed for the workers to recover from the physical demands and stress of the job. And then for the gender differences, both men and women will experience less stress, and for women specifically, they will report less depressive symptoms, and men will report less physical disorders. Since there are so many examples of positive effects on production and reducing stress related to working hours, it kind of makes you wonder why it isn't implemented in more instances, especially in the United States, where we have such a problem with it. Perhaps there is a fear of change from the norm. People are very afraid of change, and that could be a factor. In the research conducted by Park and Park, they brought up the fact that not all management techniques are as efficient as the management may think, and sometimes they just need a shock or something big that can push them in the right direction to get them to change something that needs to be reevaluated. The hopes of this researcher is that this project and others will give that shock to the management and to those who create the working regulations in America, so that we can implement these same policies of reducing the hours in a work week, so that everyone in this country can receive the benefits found there. And then this is a list of references, and thank you. Hello, my name is Mackenzie Simpson, and my research proposal is going to be about reducing the work week in the United States and the potential positive effects for workers and business owners.